India workshop on accelerating digital growth and ease of doing business. Let me just remind you to place your phones on a silent mode before we formally begin our today's program. Also, ladies and gentlemen, this session that we are now going to start is on operators, service providers and infrastructure track, and we'll be mostly talking on driving the change, regulation for innovation. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together first of all and join me in welcoming our chief guest for the program, Shri J.S. Deepak, Honorable Chairperson, Telecom Commission and Secretary, Department of Telecommunications. I'll request Shri Rajkumar Dhoot, past President, ASSOCHAM, to kindly welcome the Honorable Chief Guest, Shri J.S. Deepak, with a floral bouquet. Also requesting Shri P. Balaji, Chairperson, ASSOCHAM National Council on Telecommunications and Convergence, to also present a bouquet to the Honorable Chairperson, Shri J.S. Deepak, and welcome him. And requesting Shri Umang Das, Chairperson, ASSOCHAM National Council on E-Governance and Digital India, to kindly welcome Shri Sudhir Gupta, the Honorable Secretary, TRAI, who's also joined us today. Thank you, everyone. With that, let me hand it over to Shri P. Balaji, the Chairperson, ASSOCHAM National Council on Telecommunications and Convergence, and he'll take it forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. First and foremost, to Secretary DOT, Mr. Deepak, Mr. Sudhir Gupta, TRAI, as well as the other senior government officers here. Thank you very much for being here amongst us today. And to all my industry colleagues who actually worked very hard to kind of put this whole presentation together. We just felt after meeting up with you, sir, as well as Chairman TRAI, that it would be best to do this kind of an initiative or workshop during the day, where issues that we face on a day-to-day basis that can, on one hand, make doing business easy and also accelerate rollout of networks and the telecom infrastructure. If you could just kind of discuss that a little bit in a more workshop mode, then we'd probably get your attention and your guides on how it could be resolved on an ongoing basis. We only want to say that we are delighted that we have someone like you, with the history of the sector before, the way you've kind of hit the ground running in the last 3 months, really leaves us very enthused about what we can expect in the coming quarters and years ahead. So we're really delighted with the pace at which you're kind of driving us as well as the entire industry forward. And with that, may I just request you to make a couple of opening comments? And I know you wanted to kind of do a summation towards the end. We planned for that. The way we'll go about it now, sir, is we'll do about 35-40 minutes on the operator issues after your opening comments, which Rajan will lead, followed by Mr. Dua will then take it up for the tower issues, and then we'll have some time for your wrap-up, etc.
Thank you. It's as always a pleasure to be in the midst of all the movers and shakers of the telecom business, the infrastructure side, the operator side. And I'm delighted to be here at this ASSOCHAM event, and especially the format, which perhaps I think is great because it facilitates serious kinds of interaction on various issues of importance to all these stakeholders, including the industry. The growth of mobile telephony has been perhaps the most spectacular successes of Indian infrastructure and economy that I have witnessed in my lifetime. The growth of internet, I think, is soon likely to follow. And I say this because of the rapid pace that it's picking up. Our first 100 million connections, internet connections, took us 18 years. The second 100 million took us 3 years. The third 100 million we got in 18 months. The fourth in 12 months. And I was talking to Edel Schmidt, the chairman of Alphabet, on the sidelines of WSIS plus 10 meeting a few months back. And he said that his estimate is that of the next billion internet users, 500 million at least will be from India. That does not surprise me, as I am sure it does not surprise you, if we get our act together, both the government, industry, regulator, all of us. I also believe that the best time for the industry is yet to come. You know, broadband plus smartphone provides an opportunity which we in the developing countries have never had in our history. Again, perhaps of all the greatest tech inventions that have happened in the last 50 years. The combination of broadband with the power that the smartphone helps us unleash in the area of, in a diverse variety of areas, from health to education, from financial inclusion to human resource development, from disaster management, whatever you have, is something which we are still to, an opportunity which we are still to harvest, and I'm sure it will happen. As far as the Department of Telecom is concerned, we do believe that the time is ripe for some long overdue reforms to unshackle growth, further growth in the telecom space. Whether it's spectrum management, whether it's fiber rollout, whether it's quality of services for the consumer, or whether it is infrastructure and other reforms. I think the time has come when we need to absolutely reach galloping speeds so that what can or was planned to be done tomorrow is done today. As far as spectrum management is concerned, I don't for a moment believe that when I joined this job that I had answers to every problem that it faces. And I'm sure the day I understand it completely, I'll be very, very old. But from what I have gathered, there is enough low-hanging fruit. And what we have tried to do in reforms in the last 3-4 months is but the first chapter of a book that we have to write together. And we are committed that spectrum scarcity should not be something which should plague the Indian telecom industry any longer. Efficiency of spectrum use should be a reality. The clarifications for trading which we've come out with, the license amendments to make sharing a reality that we have come out with, are all meant, and the harmonization of the 1800, 800 bands are something which should ensure that not only enough spectrum is on the table, but industry can use it in the best way that technology would permit. The next phase going forward is, of course, we have 3-4 major areas that we are working on. One is the right-of-way rules to make infrastructure and both fiber and towers placement easy and prevent them being shut down. The second is enabling e-KYC through Aadhaar-enabled thing, which is pending last moment clearance from the Home Ministry. And general work to reduce costs, whether it's costs of power, costs of putting up infrastructure, costs of running DG set, generally cost of doing business, both in terms of time and cash. We are also trying to expand networks. The BharatNet in its phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 1 is basically taking fiber to 100,000 gram panchayats and last mile through Wi-Fi on a viability gap funding through private sector enterprise, which has been the hallmark of this sector. Phase 2 is expanding it to 250,000 gram panchayats, overhead fiber, underground fiber, a lot of wireless and satellite to enable us to do the 6 lakh kilometers by 2018. Again, last mile private sector Wi-Fi through a viability gap funding model. And the third phase, which may be 2019 to 2024, would be a state-of-the-art, future-proof network for telecom, backhaul, IoT, the works. And also simultaneously to reach uncovered areas where 10%, I believe, is the village, is the population which the footprint of telecom network doesn't reach, as well as cable, etc., to islands and far-flung areas. So that broadly is the agenda. Before I stop, I must underline the area of consumer experience and satisfaction, which is something which has propelled the growth of this sector, but which has had some setbacks in the recent past. The mobility is the killer app, the USP, the game-changing thing, and the way the country has taken to telephony and internet on the move is phenomenal. But the way the quality of service has deteriorated, obviously for reasons we all of us understand, I think it's time that all stakeholders, and since 90% industry is private, it has a huge role. The government, of course, we will try to make, facilitate all that is to be done. The challenge, next and biggest challenge is to get the quality of service back to what it used to be a few years back. And that is something which we all need to work together. I'm delighted to be here. I look forward to hearing from all of you around the table, and I'm sure that will give us very rich inputs for the agenda of government. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Mr. Gupta, would you like to add something from TRAI side?
Thank you. I'll straight come to the topics which were given for journey of simplification, ease of doing business. On these two topics, first I would like to say, like as Secretary Telecom said, we have come a long way in last couple of years, especially the last 3 years, I would say. I was pleasantly surprised about a month back when one of the CEO of a large company said that now there is enough spectrum available and probably we may not want to buy it in this upcoming auction. So coming from an era of spectrum scarcity, if now the operator, the leading operator is saying that they have enough spectrum, that's quite a long way. I think in the last 2-3 years, we have carried out a number of reforms. To name a few, I would say spectrum trading guidelines have been issued, spectrum sharing guidelines have been issued, a new unified license where the service and the license have been separated, harmonization of spectrum that was long pending issue, which from nothing we got 200 megahertz of spectrum in 1800 megahertz band, which is quite a huge achievement. And in the last couple of auctions, most of the spectrum has been sold, and now we are, we can't say that there is scarcity of spectrum, so that's a very big achievement. But still, there are certain issues which are, though we have started trading and sharing, and this is the first time in the industry when we are seeing a move towards consolidation. There is already one or two trading sharing has happened, and a couple are in the pipeline. But then, along with that, we also imposed service tax on trading and sharing and spectrum auction, which probably I would request the government to have a relook, because that's a big obstacle for if we want the industry to go ahead with such kind of a consolidation. We'll resolve it. We'll go a long way in further simplification and ease of doing business and more efficient and cheaper telecom services. There are certain other issues, I'll just flag it. like rationalization of USOF. Do we really need it? Or if we need it, do we still want to continue at 5%? Long pending issue of definition of AGR. There are a number of cases in the court, and it's a couple of years, I think it's pending in the courts. Rationalization of spectrum usage charges. Because these are the recommendations which the TRAI has given long back, and a number of times we have given these recommendations, but unfortunately they are still pending. I think the government is taking a decision on VNO very shortly, so that will also be a step in the right direction, and it will further make journey towards simplification and ease of doing business. So I think initially these are the points which I think we can discuss. Very good.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll just hand it over to Rajan to take forward the discussion.
Honorable Mr. Secretary, DOT, Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Dua, other senior leaders here, Mr. Gupta. Our intention here is just to highlight things that we believe focus on ease of doing business. That is one of the things. And so kudos to ASSOCHAM for teeing this up, saying is that let's leave the big policy issues, let's deal with the things that we can address and we can get moving. And so you mentioned moving and shaking. We haven't seen so much moving and shaking in DOT in the last several months. So thank you for being able to move and shake a lot of the stuff across the finish line, for which the operators and especially the industry is very thankful to you for that focus. So with that, I'd like to move over to the areas that we've highlighted. So if we could put that up on the screen. These are the areas that we've highlighted as matters we would like to discuss among the participants. And you've already mentioned right away and eKYC, so I won't dwell with that. I'll come back to that, sir, since you are praised of that. The one thing that is really foundational is the matter which Mr. Gupta raised, which is the AGR matter. Because that leads to the auditors, because as you well know, the Supreme Court said that's the link to which all of the audits principally get targeted. So if we could just highlight this in terms of the ILF issues, the automation process, which came as a result of the recommendations from the Honorable TRAI, and the definitional issues, the two component parts, the definitional issues, and then the processing issues. So if you could just look into that and then just have a quick discussion on this particular topic, and along with my folks, Mr. Sood from OSPI and Mr. Dua from TAIPA, if we could continue to moderate this session. It's a joint session. So let's start with this, and if I can go, and perhaps Ravi, you can perhaps give us some flair for what is the ground level challenges, both on the issue of audits as well as the AGR, because they seem to be linked, because obviously there's a close linkage on what happens. Please, so if you could just lead that, and others can participate and chime in as we go forward. Ravi, please.
The challenges which are we as industry are facing are fourfold. One is the normal assessment which is happening by DOT, because it's actually lagging behind the time. So today we would be doing assessment of 11-12. We started from 6-7, reached to 11-12, and now we are moving towards the current years. So that process actually is cumbersome, because we need to submit a lot of documents with the CCAs, and there are certain things which CCA demands are not possible because of the time lag, like you have to go and get the details signed from the banks, and if you go to a bank to get a statement signed which is 5-year or 6-year old, it's very difficult. So those are the kind of issues which we generally face while interacting with CCAs, and in fact we had the conference with CCAs in Goa, and a lot of issues have been settled. I think going forward we may see the things happening in that direction. That is the normal assessment, and unfortunately what happens is the moment something is disallowed, the numbers are so huge, and disallowance, converting the disallowance to an allowance at a later date, where the number seems to be in hundreds of crore, seems to be very difficult for even the officers who are actually dealing it, and once these are disallowed. So that is one thing where I think we need to be conscious and carry out. Secondly, there are a lot of court cases which are pending in various courts. Of course, back and forth from TDSAT to Supreme Court and back to TDSAT and then to Supreme Court. And parallelly, the matters are in high courts. Though TDSAT has given a ruling on a lot of issues, but parallelly, it is subjective to what would be the outcome of the high court cases. So, in my view, I think the call which we need to take is, going forward from today onward, can we simplify this and make it workable for the future cases? And old cases, if these are in various courts, I think can be settled at a later date. But at least going forward, we should clean this. That would be very big help for the industry from that perspective. So I think these are the two major things if we can.
Does one respond? I mean, very valid points, and we do identify these as a problem between the government and industry interface. And as you said, the efforts are being made to accelerate the assessments so that we don't want to be 3 years behind in collecting revenue, and also to I should say, reduce or bring, I mean, the litigation between government and industry is at, I think, a high point, and to bring it down. So one of them is to keep most matters in the specialist forum, TDSAT. And when I did call on the Chief Justice of India, primarily to ensure that we have a TDSAT chairman without a gap, so that we again things don't spill over to high courts and so on and so forth. We did discuss with him also how litigation could be expedited. And both for the two major issues, the one-time spectrum charge and the license fee, the AGR definition, which is causing a problem of assessment and collection and disputes in license fee. We are seeking the advice of the Attorney General on the kind of, our proposal is basically to bring them all together to either Delhi High Court or to TDSAT for one final thing, and if there is an appeal to be made, it can be an appeal to the Supreme Court. I am mindful of the fact that this was tried earlier, it didn't happen, but I think that the way we can pitch it and the reasons we can give it, we still have chances. That we'll take forward, and I do appreciate that these are chronic, what shall I say, festering wounds which we need to handle quickly.
Only one submission on this, though all litigations, etc., the way as you suggested would go on. But when unified license came, we continued with the definition of AGR in the unified license, which was coming from UASL. Can we not change this going forward, the definition, so that at least these problems are not accumulated for the future period?
The problem is that if we have, once you take a view in the Supreme Court and High Courts that this is what should be the way of calculating the adjusted gross revenue, then it becomes difficult to take a contrary view on the files even for the future. And then, so there would be, one, it will result in lack of due diligence on our position in the courts. So good thing is to stop that, get that handle, and for the future, I mean, we have a number of TRAI recommendations which makes things simple, and we have a number of orders of various, including one of TDSAT, which are, I think, helpful, and there may be others. So, but it's difficult to, at a point when you have on sworn affidavit taken a stand in various forums, to change it on your files. That's the issue.
So the other related matter on this is the automation part, which we've highlighted, which is the ILF part. And clearly that does not have to wait for the definition full-fledged to emerge. We can, even under the existing rubric of the definitions, begin the automation process, because a lot of the auditing and the checking and the verification gets bogged down in the documentation and what is acceptable and not. So again, if we could have some initiative between the industry and the government that says, how do we move the automation process forward, that would also be a matter of great help in this particular situation, sir.
I am told that they had useful discussions in Goa when the industry met with the finance part of our DOT, and we'll certainly see how we can take it forward. Yeah.
So moving then to the next section, which you had highlighted, sir, the right-of-way, which is becoming an increasingly exacerbating issue, only because now the states are getting involved, and we know alignment with the states is becoming a fairly significant issue. We very much appreciate what the DOT did in terms of coming up with the guidelines and using that as kind of the benchmark with which we try to adjust matters with the states. But most recently we had issues in UP, as you may be well aware, sir. And so if I could also have TR, who obviously represents part of that whole ecosystem, to also have your membership chime in, if you will, on the issue of right-of-way, especially in terms of aligning between the DOT now as well as the states, and what challenges are we facing, and how do we believe that the DOT can continue to be of assistance to us in this area?
Thank you very much, Mr. J.S. Deepak and my colleague. Good morning, everybody. I think it's a great and we're delighted to have you. जब भी आपसे मिलते हैं या देखते हैं तो ease of doing business तो वैसे ही अच्छा लग जाता है, लगता है हो जाएगा. You have further energized the whole sector. You further put a more excitement into the sector. I just quickly just give you 3-4 slides of what Rajan said on the status of what we are today, what the tower industry looks like today. I'm not going to into detail the membership. Everyone knows about it. Next. Towers, no doubt, plays an important role and critical role. Next. This is how the growth trajectory has been till about 1st January 2016. And we still continue to grow with the challenges that are coming, and we are handling those challenges. Next. This is the growth trajectory, which is the tenancy ratio and the number of BTSs that we have as on 2020 you'll have. I'll just give you a glimpse of the BTSs that we have. Next. Today, we have close to 1 million BTSs, and in the last about 6 months' time, I think more than 100,000 BTSs have been added. Therefore, I think the industry is really partnering to ensure that we get over all the issues of call drop, call congestion. Next. So just give you a global industry scenario. Shanghai has less than 500 customers per tower, and Delhi, on the other hand, is around plus 5,000. And you look at Bombay, it will be much more than that in Nariman. China, as far as the fiberization is concerned, the 100% towers are connected with fiber, where India, we just have 15 to 20%. One could say around what are the reason, I think, ROW, which I think you've been at it to sort it out. Next. So these are the challenges. I'm not saying that it is not being handled. It are being handled. Some of them are in place, and some of them being handled, like multiplicity of policies, multiple levies, new site acquisitions, restriction on location of the site, delay in clearances, lack of single window clearance, multiple NOCs, settling down of the operational side, and so on and so forth. There are problems in obtaining these. All that will leading to coverage gaps, call draws, QoS. We're doing that. Next. These are issues across the states, sir, not going into detail, like locational, multiple dimension, documentation, single window clearance, multiple fees. Here I want to highlight, sir, multiple levies and fees varying from 10,000 bucks to 500,000 bucks, varying from state to state. Next. Adopt coercive actions, interference of the local authorities, and multiplicity of the policies. Each one of them, like take a case in Delhi, for example, Gurgaon itself has a policy. Then Haryana itself has 2-3 policies. Punjab has Gamada, Lamada, Jalandhar, 3-4 policies which are going there. In Delhi, you have NDMC, MCD, and recently Delhi also has come out with the guideline. Thanks to you, sir, there was one issue in the Delhi, there is clause 9.2.5, which you addressed very rightly. Other day when I met the additional secretary UDT, he did mention that you had also written a letter, and that letter he showed me there, and he said this is being addressed, but it is going to take little time because this has to go back again through a body which needs rectification. Next. Sir, the way forward is alignment of the state's tower policy with the DOT uniform tower guideline, no coercive action, electricity connection to be provided on priority, single window clearance, and one-time nominal administrative fees. A lot of initiatives, sir, during your tenure, N1, have been coming, which have been helping us to roll out faster. That's why I said in the last 6 to 8 months' time, we have almost over 100,000 BTSs have been rolled out. Next. Sir, we have expert panel also with that. Can you quickly say 2 to 3 minutes each? They'll be speaking to it. Umang, you want to say a few words on that?
Yes, certainly. Deepak, it's always a pleasure to meet you. And given your experience and detailed understanding of the sector, we don't really have to give any background, and we can therefore kind of straight away go to the issue. One broad statement which I wanted to make is that this tower site is now emerging as a significant point of presence from several points of view. One is that in taking forward our mobile internet revolution, India is a hybrid model where at the back end will be the backhaul coming through fiber and the last mile front end will be wireless. I would say in a mobile base that we have today, almost 80% of that will be arising out of mobile. So given that, the kind of backbone infrastructure that we require, the tower emerges, the tower site emerges as a very significant site, where from the back end you have the fiber terminating there. I would not say that it is 100% today, maybe it is not even 20% today. But the fact is that that is the vision, that how do through the Bharat network or through the various companies laying fiber, they get terminated at the tower site. And at the front end, we have the wireless with anyway, we have the operators connecting. So facilitation of various issues which surround the tower site become very important. And along with that, we picked up another interesting point that this tower site has also caught the attention of the Department of Information Technology and your colleague secretary there, Dr. Sharma, when I met with her just a couple of days ago. She said that we have mapped all the sites in the tower sites, and we believe that our Digital India service delivery platform, while CSCs and India Post are some of the things that the Honorable Minister has already been mentioning, she said that we have also decided that tower sites also constitute a very good opportunity for delivering e-governance, government services, as also the digital literacy program, for example, or financial services. Because at the same site, you can set up a small little infrastructure with the infrastructure provider, can then ensure that various operators or service providers can offer. So I'm just making a point that this tower site or the point of presence is something which is very fundamental to the entire program of Digital India being implemented. And I'm speaking a bit on that because I'm also chairing the Digital India Council in ASSOCHAM. So this is a very fundamental program where the tower site is helping both from the point of view of mobile internet infra connectivity and also from the digital services delivery program. Now when we look at that, then some very far-reaching policies are emanating out of the center. And I think the way you have been driving the policy environment and trying to ensure that it is understood at the states is commendable. But having said that, the fact remains that, as Mr. Dua just now pointed out, there are huge gaps of understanding, both in the state policy and in the multiple policies which further follow through at a municipal level. So the question is, what is our implementation strategy for that? And you have been rightly mentioning, for example, so many cases are sitting in the courts. 80% of the cases are on commercial issues, like the high charges and so on. 20% other are because of other means by which the tower sites have been sealed, etc. We have been saying that with there's so much clarity at the center, the same doesn't prevail at the state and the municipal levels. And I think the strategy whereby such workshops, such seminars which we are holding here are also held at the hotspots at the state levels. And in one of our meetings which we had the opportunity of having with you, you mentioned that we can have a structured program of visiting various locations like Mumbai and others. I understand that subsequently you have developed an agenda of identifying 5-6 clear-cut locations. I think that will be a very positive step in that direction, so that there is more effective interaction and the issues which are being thrown up at the state level, because their perspective may be different. Somewhere along the line, we have to do more marketing of this point, that this is part of the national objective of Digital India being achieved. And it has to become a win-win proposition. And therefore, in a very structured manner, these programs and workshops necessarily have to be carried out where we would be behind you, and we believe that it is the government's credibility which will matter much more, and acceptance. Therefore, one specific action point which we need around that is this. Second is that there are all these term cells. There are the district telecom councils which are supposed to envisage multiple stakeholders. They have to be all activated. They have to become more clear about it. Sometimes the questions which we get from the term cells and the district telecom council hardly operates. And as far as the term cell is concerned, there is a big gap of understanding between what we are talking about at the national, the central level and there. So I think several agencies are there. The question is, how do we make it to happen? And since you have taken on the challenge and we are all behind you in this, I think it's important that this program of systematically holding such workshops and programs so that there is an alignment. The main point is the alignment between the center and the state. Not that there is any disagreement between us and the central policy. The issue is that when we say nominal administrative charges, it becomes very difficult to define it. But if there are 6 or 7 examples where we have benchmark cases, how do we disseminate that? I believe some examples are there, but much more needs to be done. So I think that is one point. Second, I wanted to say is that given the multiplicity of objectives out of this tower site, how do we ensure that we are able to get this classified clearly as a critical site or as a critical industry, and no way will sealing and such other arbitrary steps be taken? Irrespective of whatever be the issues, they will have to be resolved, whether it is a permission or, because the permission is, there's nothing illegal about it. All that is there is that applications have been submitted, clearances have not been achieved because of the commercial charges or whatever reason. So we believe that 2-3 specific steps are needed as an implementation program, which we agree upon, and based on that, we systematically work with you in getting them worked out at the states. That's where I'm coming from.
Just a small intervention. So I think you've taken out the policy. Quite a few states we find are very positively receptive.
There are about 7 states today.
And some which have kind of raised the question of, is this beyond the jurisdiction? It would be very useful, sir, the way you've kind of got AG and others to kind of opine on certain matters. If that issue is taken on almost head on, I'm not suggesting that collaboration doesn't work, but if it's taken head on, then the issue of who is in charge can get established, and then the workshops then after will be, more meaningful. That was one suggestion which comes.
Thank you, Umang. I mean, now, sorry.
Yeah, just a few points before this topic becomes cold. It's very important for the industry, I know, and it's extremely important for us because of the same reason. See, we are every right of way. There are lots of executive instructions. There are regulations. There are some policies, and it's quite muddy. So what we are looking to is bring out a right-of-way, Indian right-of-way rules. And we believe that we have the remit for that. And that's what our Solicitor General also says, looking at the mandate of the Indian Telegraph Act. One, right-of-way rules which define the way business is done in this area. So the industry is clear how it is done. Government agencies, local bodies, municipalities, etc., all clear. We brought out in March draft right-of-way rules, which we sent to all states and industry bodies as well. And I'm extremely grateful that the kind of inputs that we've got, all the industry bodies have come out with very rich inputs. States, I think, of the 28 states, except for 2, all have responded. And the responses, we did a video I did a half-day video link with them after we sent them to them, so I think that also helped. But the responses show that they have applied their minds at a fairly senior level, because it's not, often government responses tend to be regulatory and lots of big picture inputs coming in. So we are in the process of putting it together, and we will formulate a right-of-way rules very shortly. Now the right-of-way rules seek to address, I mean, ideally we'd like to address everything, but it seeks to basically focus on two things. Time-bound permissions for fiber and for towers, a kind of deemed approval if approval is not given on time. And that is what we are providing. And we have, it also shows the governance system in states. There are some states which are, we had suggested 45 days. Some states are saying 45 days, it should be 15. And some say 45 days, it should be at least 120. So I think we've got the mean right. But, so that is one. The other is, they should not be able to shut down towers or remove or cut fiber. Railways cut fiber of government agencies. I mean, it's amazing. And I have to take it with the railway board on a quarterly basis that these are the BSNL fibers that you've cut for non-payment. So it's not only the industry which faces. I mean, so this we need to get out of. I mean, you can't start cutting roads and fiber because commercial will continue. And we're not getting into the commercial aspect. That will have to be, that's better done between the private sector or the service provider or the infrastructure provider and the agency itself. But there should be a restriction on stopping service by sealing or removing or cutting infrastructure, and permission should be given on time. We had taken this matter very strongly with the also the part of the problem is ignorance, I would say. The other day, the Chief Minister of Rajasthan came to call on our minister, the Minister for Communication, and she was outlining the various achievements which the government of Rajasthan has done under her leadership. And one of them, she's prohibited placing towers in residential colonies. So we did I did try to tell her that this was perhaps not a very forward-looking reform, and then we told her the reasons. She was generous enough to promise that they would consider rollback because they had perhaps done it in good faith. So there's lots of ignorance, lots of this, what is the public good is understood in very different ways. So there's a role for industry, and I think specific effort is being made to have workshops and reach out to people and tell them how low-level electromagnetic radiations are not harmful. And we have a lot of material now, and the minister himself, our minister, Mr. Ravi himself is leading this effort to tell people that this is not about connectivity or good health. It can be both, and the radiations have nothing to do with carcinogen, with cancer. The other problem is the existing notification. How do we get rid of them? DDA has come out with the guidelines. So I took it up with the Lieutenant Governor, and he's been kind enough to invite me to the DDA meeting on 10th of June, where I'm supposed to make a presentation and tell him why it is a good idea to have towers and residential colonies, etc., etc. That we will do. But the problem, I asked him, what is the problem? I mean, is it so difficult to understand? And the VC DDA told me, okay, we have 14 members on our authority. There are 6 non-official members, and they are all against it. The government members are all okay with our right-of-way rules. It's the private members. So maybe there's a role for influential people in industry to reach out to them and explain to them what the facts are. So we will do our bit, and hopefully after 10 June, when the DDA will take a call on the rollback of those guidelines. But there's lots need to be done with industry. I'm accused of being very aggressive. Perhaps we are, and that's why I would not like to go beyond the point of what you mentioned, to tell municipal body that you don't have a right to do this and don't do anything with the towers. We are just saying, if you want mobile connectivity in your bedroom, your sitting room, your lobby, then towers have to be nearby. There's no other magic wand. And we are very open and very vocal about it. At the same time, we say, yes, I mean, since towers take up space, so there's a commercial disability, which thing. And we are not getting into the what are reasonable charges, etc., because that can vary. So hopefully we will, and once we put it as a rule, The idea is to put it as a rule under the Government of India Act, which makes it binding for everybody, and the other things hopefully will then wither away. The other notifications, executive instructions, policies, and most people say that you make the rules, most states say that you make the rules, and we find that many of the provisions in the states which have already made policies are in keeping with the rules except a few, so I think then the ecosystem should get at least 90% cleared.
Thank you very much, sir. I just want to give you a little bit of feedback, sir. Your personal involvement in terms of writing letters to the Chief Secretary and a video conference has made a lot of difference. Even yesterday, I was talking to the Additional Chief Secretary, Haryana. About a month back, we had finalized those guidelines and the modified notification was ready. And sir, trust me, he says, your own secretary has written to us and we are modifying those guidelines in terms of the ROW to suit the requirement of the Department of Telecom. Thank you so much, sir. May I request DS Rawat?
There's a royalty and an intellectual property in quoting my letters as...
Can I now request Mr. DS Rawat to quickly, I think 1 or 2 minutes time because everyone has to have time.
Thanks, TR.
DS Rawat is MD and CEO of Bharti Infra.
The opportunities that are there out of this, all the changes that are happening on account of data. So let me first start with 4 facts for everyone. First, 50 billion committed by operators towards spectrum in the last 3 rounds. Large part of that is towards data. Data, unlike voice, is not limited by how much people can talk. And that is why what we see as MOU ceiling in the voice world is probably not the ceiling that we're going to see in data. And that is what we're seeing in some of the developed markets, where the average user per subscriber with applications and with devices is constantly moving up. Given that the spectrum there is pretty much a constraint, we will see that these ceilings will get hit there too. Number 3, data frequencies are on the higher frequency band. And the higher you move up, lower is the coverage that you get, and that's a known fact in all parts of the world. Especially when you move from 2G to 3G and then 3G to 4G, and when I hear of 5G specifications being laid down, that's at even higher frequencies that are being talked of. Number 4, statistically from the world, 80% of data is produced indoors. And my earlier points of data growth and data being indoors and so on and so forth and coverage being weaker, I think that is the point where service quality fulcrum is going to reside. Because a lot of data users are going to sit inside, and these are heavy users, and inside is where the coverage is going to be the weakest there too. And that's what brings me to the 4 opportunities that I want to list out. One clearly is small cells, and I need to thank you for the bold initiative in working towards the government buildings, because those are pockets where definitely there is lack of coverage and huge amount of usage. That is the point where a lot of customers go down, interact, and work in smartphones in terms of fetching data and actually accessing people there. So small cells is the first opportunity. In-building is the number 2, which of course was less, the requirement was lesser for voice, again because of the restrictive usage there. But now with data, that's going to go increasingly higher. Wi-Fi offload, again from a spectrum standpoint, and also because Wi-Fi is something which is very effective inside in-building. 4th, of course, fiber, because with all this huge data usage that's going to happen, backhaul is not possible with any other technology but with fiber. So those are the 4 big opportunities that I look at. Coming down to the regulatory framework there, again, if you look at the government's vision of Digital India, some fantastic moves that have been done to really accelerate the GDP growth in true sense there. Smart cities is the second initiative that we look at. And the third one, the most important, about quality of service that's being talked of. All these definitely needs huge amount of towers for sure, but then also needs to address what's likely to come in as problems in the future. And there, my suggestion is to look at tower as a model. This was a great model created, and this is, I think India needs to take pride in creating a model where towers are shared between all operators on a non-discriminatory basis by a neutral host. And now that again has done 4 good things. Besides creating a win-win proposition, it's freed up huge amount of capital for operators so that they could focus on B2C, on the customer brand side, on building that brand and distribution network, making sure the KYC is done and rolled out faster manner there too. It created faster rollout for the subsequent operators. Yes, the first time is definitely time consuming because there's no repetition in the work there. The second operators pretty much can be on air in about a week's time. Third, of course, it reduced the cost for everyone, including the end customer. And I think this innovation was primarily on account of the pressure that came in on the cost of a lot of these operators too. Now, clearly, an independent host model of neutral service provider giving services has been well established in the tower business, and it's been a win-win proposition working for now nearly 10 years, very successfully now. There is an opportunity now to look at even things like in-building. I talked about Wi-Fi offload, fiber. These are definitely highways can be done by only one operator who can bring in large amount of capital, specialist experience of managing that asset, distributed asset there, and at the same time sharing on a non-discriminatory manner with all the operators, thereby not only reducing time to market, reducing cost, but also improving service quality. So that's all I wanted to present. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry? Yeah, please. Wrap up so that we can.
I think so. Thanks, DS. May I now request Mr. Amit Sharma, Executive Vice President and President Asia ATC, to share his thoughts and issues with regard to the infrastructure status granted to telecom towers and sharing of his international experience vis-a-vis India. Over to you, Amit.
Morning, sir. I will just add on to what DS says and Umang have covered very well, but focus a little bit on non-urban, focus a little more on the digital India part of it, and talk about two things. One is we are in about 14 countries. Global experience has shown that outside the cities, delivery, provision of broadband, ubiquitous broadband services depends on three things. One, the last mile link is always wireless. Even in Japan and Korea, who are the most fiberized countries, that is true. In the rest of the world, it is almost universal. Last mile link is wireless. Second, the level of sharing of infrastructure to serve rural communities, either by mandate of the government or by what we call PPP, creation of partnerships, is pretty much the rule, not the exception, because neither the government nor the industry can afford to cover those communities anyway. It is not economic. And the only places where it has worked is where the model is a joint working model. Third, the emphasis in delivery of low-cost services and apps that are needed in those communities not only requires joint working, but requires a very close look at every step to minimize cost. Therefore, sharing of infrastructure and use of public land and facilities. In many countries, it is free for rural service. In other countries, it is a pure cost-based recovery. So whether it is the backhaul. So for example, in India, the towers should be linked to NOFN at no cost, because that's the only way of backhauling, at least for rural, of backhauling the traffic from rural communities. Wherever additional facilities are needed or additional links have to be built out to fiberize the tower because it is miles from NOFN or from a carrier's own network. That should not only be permitted, but it should be permitted at zero cost and with a minimum level of permissions. So in a nutshell, to get Digital India down to the village level, the objective you yourself said, we will need to work together because the last link needs to be wireless, and we will need the help of the DOT and the government to provide that last link and the backhaul for that link so that the service goes back. I'll just make one other quick comment on infrastructure. DOT has given us full support for at least the last 2 years. Each time the budget comes up, we point out we are called an infrastructure industry. We are given infrastructure status, but we get no infrastructure benefits at all of any kind. Not ATI8 tax benefits, not extended depreciation. It is on the industry as a whole does not meet its cost to capital. There are one or two companies maybe who are profitable if you take a financial definition of profitable. A lot of the industry is in CDR or doesn't make money. So it's not as if these are benefits given to a rich industry. It is an industry critical to the growth of Digital India. And without these infrastructure benefits from the finance ministry, our ability to invest will be limited. Now, we've had the DOT support, but we request a little more pressure on this to the finance ministry. Thank you.
Very briefly, two points. One is regarding towers from quality of service. I mean, I think lots of, as you said, 100,000 BTSs have been put up. I monitor the last. From February, I think we have had 20,000 plus, 40,000, 20,000. February, March, it's been 40,000 or something. It's accelerating also. But a whole lot of new, as you yourself said, we have 500 people per tower in China, BTS in China and Shanghai, and it's 5,000. Small cells, more towers is the way to go. Government will try to make available spaces where it can, but otherwise it has to be, the spaces have to be rent out. And that is something which needs to be accelerated further, because that is some. I was in an election last week, and at the headquarters, they said there's no problem of technology. The service providers need to put more towers, and they need to have small cells, the smaller towers, etc., etc. So, I mean, your solutions are well available, you know. And they did say that there were a number of Indian TSPs. We're talking to vendors of various kinds to improve it. But this is urgent and extremely important. While something must have been done, the task is huge, and spectrum shortages will vanish. Regulation will soften, but infrastructure has to keep pace. And considering we are 1 billion plus, and we will be 1.5 billion maybe in a few years, that is extremely important. A word about smart cities. Now, we talk of 100 smart cities, 20 in the first phase. The Urban Development Department has asked the cities to make DPRs. What we need to do, learning from our experience of allowing infrastructure sharing late, which has resulted in lots of only, I believe, 2.1 is the tendency ratio or something. For smart cities, we need to ensure, and correct me if I'm wrong, my view is that we should design a tower, a pole, which takes care of, which through LEDs will provide the lighting. Correct. Because of the energy savings to the municipality, they would want a thing like that. That is where your BTS can be hoisted. And it should be provisioned as the infrastructure of the city is being planned. You know, you shouldn't have to really allow me, and it has to be a little aesthetically pleasing so that people do not get upset with it. All of this is possible. So I am looking at an input from you to take it to the urban development as to mandate it that while there is autonomy for, Surat may come up with one set of interventions for their need-based solutions. Varanasi may come up with something else, and Coimbatore may have a third set. This, which is a requirement of industry, should be there in all. And it can be, it's win-win. So there should be things. If I could get a input so that I could tell my colleague, the Secretary of Urban Development, to mandate it from Government of India, that whatever else you do in smart cities, you will ensure this is part of infrastructure. I think it will be a long-term benefit for industry, the telecom industry. Regarding BharatNet, see, there are two parts. Urban areas, we've left it to industry. But long way to go. I was looking at Pune, 2,540 kilometers of roads, 400 kilometers of fiber. The fiber is only in the CBD, which is to be done by private sector, and it's all TSPs put together. This is the input I have from Cisco, so it must be correct. As far as rural areas is concerned, and I absolutely agree with you, the last mile has to be wireless. In the original Bharat NOFN, the last mile was left out. The cabinet note, the first version of it, which I had drafted in 2010, said in a para that the last mile will be done separately, and then because of the huge task, perhaps it got forgotten. Now, we have, in the revised strategy of BharatNet, put in a last mile strategy, which is PPP, viability gap funding, private sector related, charging for maintenance, etc., to be given to a village level entrepreneur, to be selected in a transparent way, etc., etc., etc. And the fiber is there. Yeah. So if you want to put the tower, the Gram Panchayat is not going to object to it. They may charge a fee, which is fair. So that should take care of your backhaul requirements from rural areas. And there may be needs for connecting fibers and small things which could be done. Ultimately, we are talking of a ring infrastructure, 17 lakh kilometers of fiber, so in maybe 10 years from now, you will have all that taken care of. So rural area, I think this problem has been now understood and is implementation will catch up with it. But for urban areas, there's still an issue of good quality broadband. I suppose wireless broadband, mobile broadband can take care of it for some time, but ultimately with IoT, etc., it may be, something may be required. But the smart cities proactive suggestion, I think, is very important. Otherwise, we'll have the same problem. They set up smart cities, and then we will be running around them to ask for permission for tower here and this and that and all.
So this was actually done in a partnership with DIT and NDMC, with the chairman of NDMC, Shrivastava, and Dr. Ajay Kumar, with TRAI, which is the Taiwanese institute. So we had put it together, given a model to NDMC. It was not for BTSs, but it was for Wi-Fi. And the model is self-sustaining, it pays for itself, so NDMC doesn't pay anything. It's, the LED saving, which is paid to the organization which puts it, and so on. So it's a very detailed model, and TRAI is extremely good at it, because the entire Taiwan is covered with public Wi-Fi.
No, Pankaj, I agree, the model is available, and even NDMC is not implemented. It should be mandated, It's a good thing to suggest things, but unless it is mandated, it often gets forgotten. So that model, and there is, I understand, I've had some exposure to that model, but the point is, where is it being used? I don't see a single place where that model is being used. We are still in the old, even in Parliament, when I went to look for a site for 2 towers in the Parliament House complex, I had in mind that they will have a beautiful tower of that kind. But then you put the same old BTSs as you do, but that was, of course, emergency. But that kind of a thing needs to be, it should not only for NDMC, it should be for all local bodies mandated by the Ministry of...
It will be cross-checked with the experts, and action will be taken under Disaster Management Act 2005. So this is very strange for us. And if it happens and they have created a WhatsApp group, so it's flowing like a fire all across. So we would request your kind office to kindly speak to probably the Chief Secretary and get this, because we think that these all parameters are available with TRAI. They can always check it out, but not establish a parallel network. They have also engaged IIT Kanpur to develop some reports and come back with some suggestions, or do the analysis of the entire network which is there. So leave it to you, sir, for a quick resolution on this.
I saw those letters yesterday which have been sent to me by COAI, but to me it's an indication of the extent of the problem. So district magistrates have 20 things to do. If they're getting involved in this, they feel that this is a pain point for the consumer. So it is for us to, telling them not to do it, I can tell them, and we can tell them why they should not be vulnerable. But then the point is that someone else should be doing it. So they're very happy. I'm sure they'll be very happy. And this is Lucknow and districts in UP. So I'm sure they would be very happy to say, okay, you sort it out. Yeah, but then it has to be sorted out. So I would be very reluctant to tell them, you don't do anything, leave it to me, and then things remain as it is or worse. So that's the urgency. I mean, I look at it as a symptom of the grave urgency and the kind of things which we hear about quality. When I was Secretary Deity, it was impossible to get into any meeting of the Ministry of Communication and discuss anything other than call drops. Now people are getting tired, but still it's in the mainstream of the discourse. So we need to take care of this.
Yes, certainly.
Not to say that we'll not address them, but it is a symptom of the gravity of the pain felt by consumers. Yes?
We appreciate that. Thank you, sir. But at the same time, that can be turned into locations for us, so that also will be helpful.
That's why get back to them with a counter solution.
Sure.
Tell them to give you sites which places facilitate. And district magistrates are very, of Lucknow at least, I know him personally, he's a very reasonable person. He would sort out your problems rather than create more pain.
So if you could continue with this, I think ROW, can we move on?
Pankaj had something. You can't see. We have Pankaj just now.
I'm sorry, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, now I hand over to Manoj, who is the Senior Vice President Indus. He'll share his experiences on the energy management, which you rightly said is a major part of the expenses, and how industry is going to handling on this. A quick one, just 2 minutes.
So good morning. Highlighting the reducing the cost, the first item came is the power. So I noted it down, and it's summed up with quality of service. So here just I wanted to give one example and then probably the ask. I have 4 asks and I will narrate that. So while we say that to reduce the cost, so first of all we say that our quality of service is towards 99.5%. And power plays a very, very vital role. And when we sit here, we have made so many technological interventions to make that 99.5% by converting indoor site to outdoor sites, by removing all air conditioners, and it is not comes by its own. It is all coming with a cost that now we are elevating the temperature which is sustainable to more than 50 plus degrees centigrade. So we all know that the quality of power which we get and what we are managing, it is also not by its own. Industry is actually, sir, investing almost more than 10% to the total cost of site towards managing power only. And that is one set is the piece is the battery. We are spending roughly 1,500 crore annually, and already 13,000 crore is already.
Request one thing. Chairman is leave by 11:40 latest. So if you could just rush through things, because I see that Rajan and Pankaj and a few other people in the operator side need to.
So Balaji, I would only say this is the problem with the power. This is the always most talked item given the least priority. So what I'm trying to say, just give me 2 minutes and probably I will conclude. There is no other industry which is working on a shopkeeper's tariff, which is a commercial tariff. Probably this is the only telecom which is the industry. Though we say we are industry, but we work on a shopkeeper's tariff. We do not get industrial tariff. So this is one point which I want to address. The second, sir, I was listening to Mr. Piyush Goyal, who is always talking very smart going of discoms. At least forget the legacy, at least moving forward, if we get the priority connections on a AMR basis, in which it is a win-win situation for both. Discom gets money in time, and we do not face disconnection, which results in users of diesel. So if this is getting mandated, because we are always talking, we can suggest anything, but unless or until it is mandated, nothing happens on ground. So if the moving forward connection gets with AMR, it definitely helps industry. On the net metering part, sir, we all talk go green, go green. Discoms are very reluctant to provide net metering. It will not only provide reducing cost, but also help us to go green. The last ask, because we are investing so much because of the paucity of the power investing on the batteries, if we can be allowed to have a depreciation increase from 15% to 65%, which is already a submission many times, which will help us to depreciate our batteries in around 3 years, definitely will be a great relief to the industry. That's all from my side.
A quick one. Just give me 3 minutes more.
Let's move on, please.
Okay.
We've given you a substantial amount of time to this, and so we need to address the other significant issues that are there. So if I could just move on with the permission of the chair. Let's just move on.
We have a senior officer
let's move on,
from
please.
TRAI. Sanjeev Bansal, if you like. Or we can do it later. You go ahead.
Yeah, there is any number of issues that are there that we'd like to discuss. So we'd like to move forward on this. Okay, we've talked about RW, and I think we've highlighted these issues. I think one of the related issues that has come up, and Mr. Bansal was there in terms, is interference, right? Spectrum interference, which has significant impact on quality of service that you've raised, and we've as an industry. And I think Mr. Bansal was at Bhutan when the folks said in Thailand and Philippines, 30% of the towers of Thailand came down because of the El Nino effect and interference. Now that is a pretty intense example, but I think if we can address this issue of interference in our networks, both from the repeaters that come up illegally, sir, the use of this, as well as cross-border, as well as sometimes even between LSAs in terms of the switch outs and the changes of spectrum. So if we could just quickly have some input on that.
Thank you, Rajan. The spectrum interference has become, I think, a very critical problem nowadays. It's coming from 2-3 sides. One, of course, we had been facing in the defense areas or border states coming from Pakistan or Bangladesh, etc. So that anyway is getting resolved, I think, with Pakistan. Chairman also had the meeting, and it's likely to get resolved. One issue which most of the operator after the spectrum is liberalized have started facing is that the GSM spectrum is getting liberalized and it's being used for LTE and broadband technologies. And the moment you move towards the broadband technology, the interference becomes more and more critical. So we have started facing interference in 1800 megahertz band, 900 megahertz band. And one more thing, the moment any new operator comes and starts the broadband services, it starts interfering with the existing networks. So there is a need of a policy that how any new operator, the moment they want to launch these services, what kind of filters they need to deploy before actually they start radiating the frequency. Because if they start radiating without taking care of the existing networks which are on ground, it would decrease the quality of service and lead to.
This is something you could, sitting in the industry association around the table. Why do you want me to midwife it?
Yeah.
Mike, please.
The cordless mic.
Yeah. So the problem which is coming is that, it is not only about the operator who's existing or not. The problem is that when you have liberalized spectrum, the spectrum is being allocated, in every form and every fashion and anywhere. Now the problem is that the existing operators, the filters they were using, are either faulty or they are not working out. Ideally, the most ideal, as you said, is between operators we sort it out. But if it doesn't happen, WPC has to take the role of the arbitrator and try to resolve this, sir. Because after all, if I take a spectrum, let us say in Delhi for 3,500 crores, I need it to be spectrum, interference free. Otherwise, what is the utility of that spectrum to me?
What I'm saying is you try it yourself if you can't. You finally come back to me and say that you are going to beat each other up if you engage more. Sort it out, we'll try to sort it out. Huh?
Actually, if I may put in a word here, many years ago we had exactly this problem between the CDMA and the GSM operators. And after a lot of attempts at the industry level to try to sort it out, it did not happen. And ultimately, the Department of Telecom had to step in and facilitate. I think in this case, the problem is going to be even worse because there are going to be many, many more players than there were earlier. And I think ultimately the department has to be prepared to help as a facilitator on this.
All right. Sir, one more point there. Sir.
The third problem, which Rajan started mentioning, was the interference which is coming from illegal repeaters. That's a big challenge in most metro and big cities. The illegal repeaters are available on internet. You can buy it through the websites, or you can just walk into the markets like Gafar Market, Nehru Place, etc., and you can buy that, and they are putting up. So that is also causing a lot of interference, especially in 3G and 4G. So this all, I think, needs a attention of the department. How do we solve that?
So 2 points here. In addition to illegal repeaters, the jammers issue is very, very severe, and where we are facing a lot of problems. Secondly, sir, we are facing interference in HP Haryana for a long time now. We hope that because of harmonization happening, that issue will be resolved. So the
first thing we've tried to do is harmonization in 1800, 800. We'll continue to do that. I mean, spectrum will move and people will share and trade and so on and so forth. So that will be an ongoing exercise. This is done, and it is, I've got a letter yesterday from the Defense Secretary, which they have appreciated it, and they are thinking, and we have given them careers, and they have released spectrum and 2100 for auction. So the first phase of it was basically linked to the forthcoming auction. That has been done. We'll continue to do this. And I am aware of this. I'd link it to a bigger issue which has been raised earlier. Maybe, we have our term cells. While they have some very bright people, officers who man them, I think they need a reorientation, and they are kind of, and I would, like you've been doing workshops with the finance thing on the assessment of revenue side. 2-3 areas which we need to look at is maybe, they are very regulatory and penalty oriented, and we have marched up 6,000 crores of penalty which they have levied, which we are again in court with the industry. What they need to perhaps do, and we would like to reorient them to do some of these things and understand this better. So we will look for suggestions on the agenda, and maybe 3 months, in the next 3 months, I would like to hold a big meeting of our term cell people and see that in addition to the statutory things which they have to do and regulatory things which they have to do, what else they could do which could be useful for the sector as a whole.
Good morning, sir. Pankaj, Sharma, Telenor. So we have discussed, even from the infrastructure side and even from the operator side, we are bringing up a lot of operational issues. These are the issues. You said best of industry is yet to come, and we are very sure of it. And these operational issues, if we can establish some sort of a joint working groups, between the industry and DOT. We did this experimentation in TRAI, I think sometime last year, where, for doing this trading and sharing guidelines, joint working groups were established, and we found that those results, I think everybody was very happy with, inputs that went in. So, since we're talking about all of it.
Call drop regulation, outcome of that joint working group?
Well, I think the gaps were just too much.
Joint working group was at the Supreme Court level, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sometimes you need an arbitrator. Yeah. So that was just one of my points. And I do believe, with the kind of positive energy that we're seeing over here, over next 12 to 18 months, all these issues will be behind us. So I'm going to talk about a long-range, strategic regulation type of, issue, or say a suggestion that, I would like to put forward. Now, if we really see what are we really looking at, in terms of, if we say that what are we talking, what do we really need for digital world? We need, if we can coin a word called digital regulation, and what are the two parts of this digital regulation? And one obviously will be how can, as telcos, we can be more and more efficient, increase more and more scale. And that kind of, helps us in pushing this digital agenda, pushing this, digitization to the last mile. Now, if we see overall digitization as a process, I mean, one of the bigger things which has actually expanded around it is internet. And the whole digitization over the last 10 years has gone around, internet has been one of the main drivers. And one of the behaviors of internet is obviously it is boundaryless behavior that is there. And if you're seeing the upcoming of all the so-called internet companies or, internet product companies which have come up in last 10 years, they have come up on the basis of this internet on something called, which is known as the global architecture. So all the big internet companies that we're going to compete tomorrow are built on global architecture. But if you look at every telco, and this is more of a problem, India, Asia, everywhere, where they're going to put their, network elements. If you look at our own, even so-called unified license, it is still based upon, the country architecture that each and every network element needs to be here. So in the next round of regulations that we're looking at, if as telcos we want to be more efficient, we have global operators who are operating in India, and we have Indian operators who are going global. So that's the kind of journey we're going to take in next 5 to 10 years. Can these regulations that you're talking about can be open and cross-border, so that all these issues where my IT cloud tomorrow needs to sit, need not be an issue? Yes, two things digital regulations definitely need to take care. One is the consumer privacy, and second is the country security. So as long as regulations are taking care of these two issues, then can telcos, really get into this world of expansion was one of my points, and that will give us kind of scale to, compete with internet companies. On ease of business, I think a lot has been said. I would say is, anything that is interactional, if it can go online, which I think you also spoke about it. If tomorrow I need a number series, do I need to put in an application, or can I just put in online? If I need a WPC wireless license, can I do online? So if everything on that, I need to interact with DOT on day-to-day basis. If that can be online, I think that will greatly, increase the efficiency of the system. And I think we'll be only coming to DOT headquarters to discuss the policies or the new things that we really need, and not day-to-day operational issues. Nowadays, I think, as operators, we spend most of our time in DOT headquarters discussing operational issues.
Thank you, Pankaj. Point well taken. Yeah. Regarding, I just half a minute. I do take your point that much of the interaction between industry and government is sorting out issues which should get sorted out. To start with, at least I am looking very closely at the WPC, wireless part of it. And my target for myself is that we have a lot of pendency on SACFA clearance. It's embarrassingly large, so I don't even mention the figure in public. But in the next 3 months, we will make sure that it is all. One is that by end of this month, hopefully, we will bring that pendency down by certain measures that we've already initiated and which are close to fruition. And in 3 months' time, it will be online. There will be no interface, whether it's Airports Authority, whether it's the defense airports, whether it's DOT or WPC. That is what we do. And then we take it to further areas. I mean, this is a pain point which I have noticed myself, because the number of letters I get from operators about pending SACFA clearances is very painful. So we will go forward and we'll consult with you on other areas of priority. Paperless in 3 months. Absolutely end-to-end online paperless in 3 months. That's what our target for ourselves is.
Yeah, sir. In addition to
maybe it will happen in 2 months.
So in addition to SACFA, the next activity is wireless operating license, which in our view is redundant actually. Once the earmarking letter is issued, that has to be treated as wireless operating license for all practical purposes.
And sir,
and also the import license.
The first one is achieved, we would be hugely encouraged to take it forward further. And the roadmap is clear. I mean, this is being discussed in the Department of Telecom for, I think, a decade now. And so we know what is the requirement of industry. Let's see how far and how fast we can take it together.
So, sir, related to that is the issue of the import license also, sir. So today, I have to wait sometimes 3 months, 4 months just to import the equipment. So that is the other area I think we need to look at.
Sir, the sensor network, then cloud computing, and all other things. So for that, of course, infrastructure providers will have a lot of opportunity to increase and to go in small cell portion, Wi-Fi solution provider, last mile connectivity, and they can work with municipal corporations or state governments. So they have a lot of things to do. But on the part of the government, important thing is to have the interoperability standards between the multiple protocol and multiple networks, because there is going to be heterogeneous ICT network. So that's one very important portion which needed to be worked. One is about the quality of service for the M2M devices. Then we will be having numbering and addressing will be another issue which is going to come, because the present mechanism is not sufficient. Infrastructure sharing will be another very important area. Then energy efficient ICT system should also be there. As Secretary TRAI has rightly said, now we have moved to a situation where we are from more supply than demand regime we have entered. But that achievement we have done for the access portion of it, sir. We have to support it by the more spectrum on the backhaul side, because the laying of fiber with 17 lakh kilometers, as you have said, will take years' time. But for till that time, we need to have more pipe on backside. And for that, sir, TRAI made the recommendations 2 years back on backhaul connectivity, wherein we have said that there should be 5 more bands should be opened other than the 4 existing bands. That is 13, 15, 17, and 21 gigahertz band. Other than that is about the E band and V band, sir. Wherein also we have made recommendation that as the industry is saying that we should go for light licensing or light regulation type of mechanism, wherein online only you can just register and get your point-to-point connectivity. And V-band will also be very, very important, because presently we are having Wi-Fi only in 2.4 gigahertz and 5.8 gigahertz. In 2.4 gigahertz, we are only having 83.5 megahertz of spectrum. And in 5.8, we are having only 50 megahertz of spectrum. The kind of situation which is going to come in coming years with the unrolling of smart cities, there will be huge requirement of Wi-Fi spectrum also. So we need to unlicense this V-band also. That is also very, very good initiative which we can take along with the backhaul connectivity. These are my thoughts on that.
Thank you, that's useful. See, we have before us some very good and far-reaching TRAI recommendations, and I divide them into two parts. One is those which we can grab and implement straight away. So virtual network operator, which we are looking for in 2009, before the first auction. The interconnect, IP interconnect, they gave us a recommendation 16th Feb, and we've kind of taken it to Telecom Commission and notified it in 1 month. There's certain very valuable recommendations which require, which because of legacy and other reasons of our, take longer to think. V band, E band, MWA, MWB. You know, we have decisions on our file at almost at the highest level saying that MWA, MWB spectrum should be auctioned. Now, I mean, to turn that around, you know, to turn a ship, it takes some time, you know, so we have to kind of do a process in government to do that. So we are mindful, I am certainly mindful of the fact that backhaul, wireless backhaul will remain an important backhaul requirement for a long time to come, and we will address it hopefully. See, we now have made a decision. When I was Secretary Deity for 5 months, I attended one Telecom Commission meeting. There was only one, and it had one agenda item, which was basically related to sorting out a problem of liberalization of spectrum. Now we do a Telecom Commission meeting every month. I've done 3, and I have another one on spectrum issues next end of this month. And it's loaded in. So we are taking these things very quickly to get the clearance. And MWA, MWB, V band, E band, certain other issues related to, are all queued up, so to say. My colleagues in the Finance Ministry and otherwise who are on the Telecom Commission say that they will not accept more than 6 items of this commission. So that is the constraint we have, but we should get through with that in 3 months.
Sir, continuing from ease of business, Balaji, just a minute. Continuing from the ease of business, sir, one more thing, the service clearance. Before the launch of the service, for every service, every value-added services, we have to get the LI clearance, which takes a lot of time. I think all this can be done parallelly after the operators have launched and told to DOT parallelly. And the second one more important issue, I think, which has been not come up in the discussion is around the same service, same rule. There is a DOT committee report which talks about the OTT communication services to be brought to the same level of the communication services, because the voice service provided by the licensed versus voice service provided by the OTT operators are same. So I think this is high time when DOT should intervene and bring some sort of level playing field between the operators and the OTT service providers providing the communication services, not the content services. Of course, content is already being taken care by TRAI. But this is a very important issue, I think, where your intervention is required, sir.
Sir, I'd like to actually draw it back into broadband infrastructure. After listening to what everyone is saying, it's very clear that broadband infrastructure is informally being used anyway as a utility. And this is, I think, in some way, there is so much of scope for policy to gather all that is happening and try to look at creating a policy around broadband as a utility. There are other governments who have started to do that. And you were talking about fiber cuts. Today, if anyone cuts power, it's a criminal offense. So in the same way, if there is scope to ensure that broadband infrastructure becomes a part of the water, the power, the whatever else that is there, and something that we can do around it. So maybe it will solve fiber cuts, solve operator problems, and it will solve data consumption. So I mean, what I think, where I'm coming from is this is a good area for getting into a workshop to, do something around policy for this specific space, and interministerial also.
Sir, yeah. Thank you, Balaji. From the point of view of ease of business, there is one request on the rollout obligations. With every auctions, there are attached obligations to it. We are not shying away from fulfilling the obligations, but there is a lot of clarity and simplicity required on those accounts. We can share the details with you. For example, now when we are doing harmonization, our frequency bands will change, and there is one tranche of obligation to be fulfilled in mid-June again. So every time you have to go back to...
The rollout obligations that we are proposing for the forthcoming auctions is as liberal as anywhere in the world, I mean, from my knowledge. We are saying it is not related to the band. It is, if you are providing services, suppose I mandate district headquarters or something like that, and if you're providing through some other spectrum, and you buy another spectrum, if you're providing services, it's fine. So it's very, very generous. It has not yet been approved. It has to go to cabinet. It is meant to be band agnostic, and the idea is to get services out, and we understand that technology is creeping in where you provide the same service through multiple bands, through carrier aggregation and other things. So it should be in sync with that.
Thank you.
Well, I was supposed to give the vote of thanks, actually. Come prepared with a lot of papers here, and before he could say his bit, it was hijacked by people around the table, which was just as well, because that gave it the flavor that I think we had wanted, that people can come out and speak their mind openly without any fear of any kind, and that there would be people like Mr. Deepak would be sitting across the table and listening, which he did. He's obviously a very good listener. And I think I need to thank you, Mr. Deepak, for taking the trouble of having come here, spent your 2 hours here, and interacted with and responded positively to almost all the issues that were raised, and very frankly letting us know what you and the department are doing on most of these issues. We appreciate that a lot of it is work in progress, but it is very heartening to see that things are moving, and therefore they'll ultimately get there. I take this opportunity to thank the officers from the TRAI, Mr. Sudhir Gupta, Secretary TRAI, and Mr. Bansal, who've taken their time out to come and hear what the industry wants to say. Also, my colleagues from the industry, it is difficult to read out the names of the list because then I would spend the whole day, but suffice it to say, I think the CEOs who are sitting around this table, they have taken time out, which shows how important this meeting was for them. The regulatory heads from the various companies, people from KPMG, and of course, I would like to thank Mr. Balaji and his team at ASSOCHAM for having organized this workshop. With that, I give the mic to Mr. Shetty to summarize what happened.
I think very important point today was all the issues that we discussed, and I'm completely independent because we are just consultants, right? And we've seen the government, the regulator, the industry association. I think every issue that was discussed, there is clearly some thinking behind what we're trying to do about it. There is some thinking of how do we solve this. And I look at it in an overall picture. Having seen the industry grow from 20 years back, this is the lifeline for India. It is very different from telcos necessarily in other countries, because what this has done, and the impact, sometimes people keep looking at how many jobs it has done, but this has impact across the country. And if it is one thing that can catapult India into being a real power, an intellectual power. And to do all of those things, very important, and we've been talking digital. Some of the solutions were actually all digital, about how do we get online, how do we reduce some of the regulation and simplify some of the regulation. But really, what in essence is, if we can get all of this, what we've discussed, there will be lesser disputes, there will be better quality of service, right, most importantly. And I think, like I said, this is one industry that will give an impetus for India to grow. So I think, having looked at all the issues, we've compiled a publication. It's good to hear how the regulator, how the government and how the industry are working together. So that's really what I had to say.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been very useful to hear a lot of suggestions from different sectors of the industry, and it gives us a reality check as to what we are doing, what is the need for the future. one thing let me assure you that and I think we at the DOT, and I'm sure it applies to TRAI as well, are absolutely confident that there's so much to be done in the area of reforms in the telecom sector that even if we do a lot of it, we are not at risk of working ourselves out of a job. So we'll continue at it with that, that feeling and focus. And I hope we can have these kinds of interactions and keep getting a pulse of what the needs of industry is. Thank you so much for